Up until university, I thought I wanted to work in a lab. I wanted to be a scientist. So I did my degree majoring biomedical science. And after that, then I had a choice. I could go to another research school doing a master's degree and a PhD, or I could do a gap year. So I chose a gap year. My husband has previously founded another startup, which unfortunately didn't work. So he's always been very entrepreneurial. So during the honeymoon, he had an idea that why don't we start a startup together, because we are both data driven and we both like numbers and we also like the lifestyle that entrepreneurship offers. I guess from a personal perspective, I don't know if this is a cliche, but my mom is my hero because when she was growing up, she didn't have much, but when my sister and I were born, then she made sure that every dollar, everything she had, she would give it to us.
Welcome to Seedstars podcast. Seedstars is an organization that aims to have an impact in emerging markets by supporting the local entrepreneurs, investing in their ventures, but also sharing their story globally because we really believe they are the true heroes. We'll be listening to them and other thought leaders and disruptors that are really shaping the future of tomorrow, and we hope that together we can build a sustainable impact. Before we start, I would like to thank our partner GSMA, who made today's episode possible.
Hello and welcome to today's episode of the Seedstars podcast. I'm your host for today's show, Pete Craig, and after 30 years working in business, many of those with startups, I now work with startup teams and visionary leaders to help them accelerate their potential, accelerate their growth, and most importantly, accelerate their impact in their industry. And that's one of the things that drew me to Seedstars, and it's why it's my great pleasure to be here today presenting one of these podcasts for you. The impact that Seedstars have in technology and in the emerging markets, I think, is amazing. And I'm really happy to support that and encourage more and more people to dive into this world of startups and to explore how technology can actually advance and improve society as a whole. So today's guest is someone that's perhaps got a slightly different angle to many of the entrepreneurs that we've perhaps spoken to, because she's got her own challenges. I say challenges, joys and challenges that we'll talk about a little bit more. But to give you a little bit of background, after 3 years working at IBM, she then spent some time working for Boston Consulting Group before, for some reason, deciding that actually what she wanted to do was go into startups. And that's always a question that I'm curious about, why people do that. So please welcome me and join me in welcoming Anne Pichestapong, the co-founder and CEO of DataCue. Welcome, Anne.
Hi, everyone. Thank you, Pete. Hi, everyone. It's a pleasure to be here.
Fantastic. So let's start. Just explain in your own words what DataCue is, and then we'll dive into some of the other questions that I've got prepared for you.
So DataCue is a plugin for e-commerce websites, and what we do is we have built an algorithm that collects the behaviors of the visitors on the website, and then we use this information to tailor the content on the homepage and the store in general so that it's more suited to their interests. So for example, if you're looking for a new pair of shoes, then the next time you come back to the website and we start showing you more images or more promotions that are related to what you were looking for. Okay,
fantastic. So this is a little bit of a departure because on reading your profile, actually your degree was in natural sciences. So where does I'm curious to know what's the jump, or what was the link, or what was the decision behind going from natural sciences into business strategy and analytics?
Well, yes, you're right. So up until university, I thought I wanted to work in a lab. I wanted to be a scientist. So I did my degree majoring biomedical science. And after that, then I had a choice. I could go to to another research school doing a master's degree and a PhD, or I could do a gap year. So I chose a gap year. So during the gap year, then I started traveling. I was in Denmark for 6 months to do an internship in a lab. And then I was in Japan, I was in Singapore doing different research internships. And the conclusion that I got after that gap year ended was that this is not something for me. I don't want to work in a lab. So I think in a way, it wasn't like a complete waste of time because I could have gone, the other way and then wasted 10 years doing research. So I'm glad I found out early. And after that, then I decided to come back to Thailand because I spoke to my parents, and then I think they gave me a hint that they're not going to support me financially for me to travel around the world doing, these random internships. So I came back to Thailand, and then I found a job at IBM. And at that time, IBM was accepting fresh graduates into their graduate program. I think the program is called Consulting by Degree. And then what this means is that IBM has a subsidiary and they do a consulting project as well for their clients. So they take in fresh graduates regardless of which degree you have, and then they train you up. So when I was at IBM, that's when I think I got a taste of doing technology consulting, working with clients, and doing more of a client-facing role, right? And yeah, so after that, then I decided, okay, this is pretty fun. But IBM was purely technology consulting, so I was doing a lot of HR technology, doing a lot of IT vendor management, for example. And then I wanted to try something else. So I wanted to try something that's more general. Yeah. So I moved to the Boston Consulting Group, or BCG, in Singapore, where I was doing more management or strategy consulting. So something that is one level up than IT consulting. So I was there for a while, and
What was the jump then to it's obviously something that's very different, e-commerce and data, big data. It's essentially what you're doing is you've taken the technology and the kind of data science that the big companies like Amazon and Google are using, and you've condensed it and put it in a format that kind of small e-commerce businesses can use.
Yes.
So what was the trigger for that? How did that come across?
So I started this company with my co-founder, who is also my husband, and his background is he was a data scientist at TripAdvisor. So he's very good with numbers, with analytics, with e-commerce. And I am also a very data-driven person because of my background in science. And when I was in consulting, I always, it's all about crunching the numbers and then giving the client something meaningful out of data. So I'm also very comfortable with data. So after we got married, we did this crazy trip where we packed up everything we had into backpacks, and then we left to Central America for a honeymoon. Yeah. And the plan was to travel throughout Central America and then go to South America, and then we would come back home in Singapore. And then I think while traveling, we realized that because when I was in consulting, I was constantly traveling on a project. And we realized that the honeymoon was actually the first time that we spent
together.
Together. Yeah. And so my husband has previously founded another startup, which unfortunately didn't work. So he's always been very entrepreneurial. So during the honeymoon, he had an idea that why don't we start a startup together, because we are both data driven and we both like numbers, and we also like the lifestyle that entrepreneurship offers. So
did he already have that idea of using kind of the technology and the knowledge that he had from TripAdvisor? Did he already have? Was that already a seed within him that you then discussed, and that's where this was born from? Yeah, is it? And I'm going to sound a little bit sexist here, but was it a mix of like him understanding how that piece worked, and then you kind of realizing that e-commerce and shopping was actually a growing market, and that you could actually benefit some of these smaller companies? Yeah.
Definitely a bit of both. So where we were coming from is that we definitely want to work with data. We realize that only big companies have enough resources to tap into. They can hire consultants, they can pay these companies to help them derive something meaningful out of data. But SMBs, small and medium businesses, they don't actually have these resources. So what we wanted to do is to democratize data, to bring data to SMBs. And we picked e-commerce or retail because we realized that this is an area where it's going to explode in the next few years. I mean, you've already seen with the virus and the pandemic, a lot of industries are affected, but e-commerce is like one of the few industries that's skyrocketing. Because now people are so it's definitely going to stay even after the pandemic has passed. So what we I also, you're right. Like I shop a lot. I shop online a lot. Yeah.
I'm glad you said it, because I didn't want to say it, but I didn't want to make that assumption. But
yeah, and it's definitely a pet peeve of mine, because whenever I remember like going to a website multiple times, looking for something very random, like it could be a bed, a mattress, a pillow, but this website kept showing me electronics every time I went back. And then I would be like, I've been to your website so many times, like you could have shown me something better. So it also triggered that urge to fix it.
Yeah, no, 100%. You're definitely right. I mean, user experience is everything these days. It's becoming more and more prevalent. I've been in the online space for 10, 12 years now. As a copywriter, as a product manager, and helping startups in that way. So I definitely see the importance of actually tailoring messages and tailoring content to the audience, because it just makes it so much easier it makes them feel like you understand them, but also it makes it so much easier for them to make a decision and for you to secure an order or a purchase.
Yes, definitely, because if you think about it, right, like when you go to a physical store, the fact that you like going to a physical store so much is because there are like sales assistants who are there to guide you through your purchase. But that is not there when you go online. So if e-commerce is going to be booming, if it hasn't already, then how can we merge the experience between the online world and then what you would get in the physical presence?
So I'm interested now as well to understand the structure, not the structure, but the location. And it makes a little bit more sense now that you said you went on your honeymoon to Central and South America. But the company's split between Singapore, Luxembourg, and Chile, and your primary market is Chile and the Spanish-speaking LATAM market. Is that right? Yeah. What was there something specific about that market, or the potential in that market, that you saw that you felt was you felt that was the place to start?
It really helped that we received this funding from the Chilean government, like I told you before the call. So that was like the seed where we were able to turn the idea into like an MVP, a minimum viable product. But at the same time, after we started selling, or after we started talking to more and more customers, we realized that LATAM is still pretty much an untouched market, because most of our competitors are based in the US, I would say, and then some are in Europe. So they are focusing on English speaking clients and or like German or French speaking. And what's nice about LATAM is that there's few competitors, and at the same time it's very homogeneous. So it's Spanish speaking, right? Unlike, for example, Europe, where if you want to localize your product, you have to translate it to French, Spanish, German, or Dutch, for example. Whereas in LATAM, if you translate it once to Spanish, then it works in so many countries. Yeah, and then so because of that untapped opportunity that we saw in LATAM, that it's still a very attractive market, like for us, and I'm sure for other startups as well.
Yeah.
So
I want to pull you back a little bit, because this is something again that I'm kind of like fascinated by, and you don't see it very often, and that's kind of like husband and wife startup teams. What's that like? How is it work? And I know you're both in separate countries at the moment, so perhaps it's easier being apart. But what's it like? A, working with your partner and living with your partner, but B, you've now got a young baby as well. So how do you manage that?
it's definitely challenging, I'm not going to lie. And in the beginning, when we decided that we wanted to start a company together, one of the biggest concerns I had was that how would it affect our personal relationship, because we were going from not seeing each other, like, because I would be going and coming like every few days, so I would go from seeing him maybe once a week to go to like seeing him every
24
day.
hours, 24 hours a day, yeah.
Exactly. So that's what I was worried about, and at the same time there would be a separation between personal and professional life, right? Because earlier when I was doing when I was in a corporate job, then if I didn't like my colleagues very much, then I could just tell him. But now he's like the only colleague I would have, so who would I complain it to, So that was the worry. But
how did you manage that? Did you agree? Did you sit down and address that from day one? Did you set out boundaries about how you were going to work and how you'd communicate in order to mitigate some of those stresses and potential pinch points?
Yeah, I don't think we formally sat down and then talked about it, but I think after we started the company, it naturally came to a point where even though we would work in a room together all the time, but I would be working on different things and then he would be working on something else. So there's that level of independence, even though we are physically together. So, and then I think what that gives us is that it gives us our privacy in a way, because I'm starting a different marketing campaign, I'm contacting different clients while he could be busy supporting existing customers, he could be busy improving our technical infrastructure, for example.
Yeah.
And then so there's that line where I don't touch his work and then he doesn't touch mine. So it's not as much it's not very there's a clear line of separation in terms of what we are responsible for in the company.
And now with a baby in the mix as well.
with a baby in the mix, so that's hard. But I consider myself lucky in that sense, because compared to my friends, for example, maybe they would get 4 months or 6 months with the baby and then they would have to go back to work. For me, I don't. If my daughter is sick, I don't have to ask my boss for sick leave, right? I have that flexibility. I can spend my morning with her and then I can work in the afternoon while she naps or she sleeps. At the same time, I have that luxury that my husband is here to help me with the baby, because in most countries, paternity for a father,
it's very limited.
It's very limited. Whereas here, we have that system where, because I'm an early riser, so when she wakes up at 6, for example, then I would be with her. And then if she wakes up in the middle of the night, then he would take care of her. So, and I think in that way, it really helps me because I can still manage to get something done for the company. And then I know that a lot of women, after they've given birth, depression is very common, because it's very hard. So I think that's like I'm very lucky in that sense.
Were there any what have been the biggest challenges in your growth? So you've been operating now for 18 months?
For almost 2 years, yeah. We'll keep.
So what have perhaps been some of the biggest challenges that you've had to face, and how have you faced those together as a as a unit?
I think the first challenge that we are still having today is to get to the product market fit. I would say in the beginning we made a promise to ourselves that we wouldn't write a single line of code until someone has agreed to pay, because we wanted to avoid that trap that you built something that no one wanted, right? So we got a paying client, a first paying client, very soon after we launched the idea, so which was nice. And I think for us, but one person saying yes is different from having a product that the rest of the market wants to pay for. And I think that's still the issue that we are trying to solve every day. Like, how can we make the product better? How can we make onboarding faster? And now that we know where, that we are targeting small and medium businesses, how can we reach these SMBs faster? How can we convince them that this is a no risk product that you can try? So that's still a challenge today, and I think also for many early stage startups out there. And I think for us, because we started the company in Chile, and I would say that our Spanish when we started was far from desirable. and in Chile, not a lot of people speak English, so we had to adapt very quickly. So I still remember my first presentation where we went to a client and then I had to pitch to them in Spanish. It was downright awful and embarrassing, but you learn from it, and then you just kept adapting.
My next question was going to be, what were the unexpected obstacles that you came across, launching a business in LATAM?
The language piece, actually, I think we were pretty naive when we started the company that, it's a digital company, maybe Spanish is not that important. And I think we underestimated that, because what we found is that people still buy from people, and what that means is that they need someone to talk to. They want to know that, especially in LATAM, it's still very much the culture is still like Southeast Asia, where I come from, where if you have a problem, then you want to pick up a phone and then call someone who speaks your language to troubleshoot for you, right? So I think that's something that we overlooked. And also the point where that we expected that because it's a SaaS, it's a digital solution, that someone would come to our website and decided that they wanted to try it. That was completely not true, because they still wanted someone to speak to. They even wanted us to meet them in person, even though they are paying $50-$100 a month. So So
and I guess does that put additional pressure then on the business, because usually in a SaaS business, most of those customer service type roles, those onboarding roles, are all automated. Whereas here, this needs manpower. This needs physical time.
Yes, definitely. So what we started doing is we hire someone in Chile, and then she's in charge of generating leads, going to meet them, and then trying to close the deals. And in the beginning, it was working fine. And then I realized that if she has to meet them twice for someone to sign up, then this is going to be a very, very expensive acquisition. So what we started doing is that we started switching her to larger, more enterprise accounts, so that it's worth her time to go and speak to them.
I think that's a really important kind of like insight, for anyone else who's kind of like either in that market or is thinking about launching a startup in the LATAM market. It's just understanding, or anywhere actually. It's important to understand the society. It's important to understand the culture before you make assumptions about how your business is going to work. We all think that technology, everyone wants technology, but the truth is, people want technology if it works for them, but they don't want technologies just because you tell them it's going to work for them. Yeah.
I mean, what I said is really true. Like, people buy from people. So for me, what really helped and what the accelerator startup Chile that I was in was very, very helpful, was to help me build my own network in Chile. And I think that would be the advice I give to any entrepreneur as well if they plan to launch in a country that they don't know a lot of people. So join an accelerator, get them to introduce you to other people in your area that you want to target, and then go from there.
How did you, I just want to wind back a little bit to, you mentioned that you took someone on, a native speaker in Chile, to take over that role. How did you manage that? What was the recruitment process like? How do you keep control of that? Not control, or how do you manage that person when they're so remote, and when there is a clear language difference as well? So how did you manage that process?
So our team has been remote from the start, right? Because now we are a team of 5. And so my husband and I are here, and then we have one person in Ireland, one in Poland, and then the salesperson in Chile. So 5. So we've been very open from the start that we don't care how many hours you are working today, as long as you deliver results. So we have a team call at the beginning of every week where everyone talks about what they've achieved last week and then what they plan to do this week. And based on that, then we do some one-on-one catch-ups throughout the week. But we expect you to finish what you promised to do at the beginning of the week on Friday. So even if you have to move your house, you have to go visit someone, it doesn't matter to me, right? Because we are all on different time zones. So it's impossible for me to know what you are doing at 2 p.m. your time.
Yeah.
So yeah, and for our team member in Chile, we were pretty lucky because I did a pitch, and then after that, then we started. So she was working at Microsoft before, and then she happened to be at the pitch event as well. And then after that, so we got talking, and then at that time, my co-founder Sharam and we already had an idea that we wanted to hire someone to help us sell in Chile, because what we realized also is that with medium-sized or bigger companies, the trust factor goes up when they know that the other person is also local.
Native.
Native. So we were already thinking about hiring someone, and then after we met her, and then we got along so well that we invited her for dinner, I guess, and then we were telling her about what we plan to do, and then one of which is to hire a salesperson. And then after that, so we didn't even offer her the job. We were just asking her for advice, where should we go to hire someone?
And she put herself forward.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And she put herself,
Fantastic.
And I mean, I'm very proud of our team. We are such a small company that if one of us is not motivated or dedicated, then it doesn't work. Because as a startup, I can't match her salary at Microsoft, right?
Yeah.
It's not possible. But what I can offer her is the learning. She would be doing all the sales. So that's the beauty of working in a startup, because no one really knows how to do it. So you have to figure it out on your own, on what works.
You really are in most startups. You really are part of a team, especially when they're small. And I think that's that's important, and that's what pulls people across. Is that feeling that they belong, but also the feeling that they're building something, and they're building something together. So how do you are you active in the culture you try and build, or is the culture building just around yours and Sharan's personalities and your own ways of working, or are you consciously trying to create it sounds like you're creating a culture of responsibility, of impact, and of results, by giving people that flexibility. That sounds like the culture that you're trying to build is.
And then we want them to have an ownership of their work.
Yeah.
So we want them to be proud of what they are doing. We want them to feel like they own part of the company, that they are not just this indispensable part. Like, we want them to feel like they are proud to work at DataCue, to help us grow the company. So we give them ownership. Because most of the times we don't have answers to what they are doing, right? So they have to figure things out. So we give them that liberty, that flexibility to figure anything out on their own. And I think so there's no set culture or guideline that we have per se.
Yeah.
But so ownership and also transparency. We are very transparent with them in terms of how much revenue we are making, how many people are in the pipeline, how much money we've received from the government, etc. So I think that's how the company runs.
You mentioned that you went through your study, and that you had a conversation with your parents, and you went back to Thailand because you realized they weren't going to continue to finance your round the world trips, your globetrotting trips. Was there a resistance from your parents at all when you said that you were going to start a startup? How do they feel now?
So in the beginning, when I told them that I wanted to quit my career in BCG and then started my own thing, I can say that they weren't very pleased. It wasn't something that they expected to hear, I would say. So because they come from a generation where success is defined by having a very long and stable and secure career that you can hold on for decades. You just keep going up on the rank, right?
Yeah.
So when I told them that I'm just going to start my own company, and then I'm not going to be making much, and I might need the financial support again soon. Hopefully not, but if push comes to shove, then maybe. So they were very happy. But I told them that, look, this is one chance that I could, if I make this work, then it's going to be something that I own. That I'm not going to be, I'm not going to be working for someone else. It's going to be my own business. It's going to be something that I build, and also because of this funding from the government, so it means that I have some initial capital that I can use to start the company. It doesn't mean that I'm taking my own savings to build it.
Yeah.
So they were okay, and I think now that's a few times where they asked me if I wanted to give up because I mean, we are still not making much, right? And then we are still not at that point where I can, because what I want to do once we are successful is to pay my employees market rate, because now we are still paying them very low rate because we can't afford them. So that's what I want to do. So we are still not there yet, and then my parents know that, and then but I told them that, look, so far we have these paying clients who are happy with DataCue, who are happy with what we do. I'm confident that we can make this work. So, and now like we don't trouble them financially. So while it's still running, then I want to just see where this goes.
What's the you can't integrate with Shopify, don't you?
Yes.
How was that something that you identified early on, or is that something that came kind of like later, and what impact has that had on on the business?
In the beginning, we didn't set on building an integration with Shopify right away. But after we got our second paying client, they are pretty big in Chile and they are hosted on Shopify. And then I think that was the point that we realized that Shopify, building an integration for Shopify can be big because Shopify is growing and then there are so many stores on Shopify. So if we build that integration once, that can be used with many Shopify stores. So I think that was the point where we realized that, okay, there's something here.
Yeah. And is that paying off?
Yeah, definitely. 70%, 80% of our clients today are on Shopify. And it's still, even though we have integrations with other e-commerce platforms as well, Shopify by far is still the platform where the integration is still the easiest. And
so on that, while we're talking about kind of like platforms like Shopify, but also kind of like the technology that you're using, the data science that you're using, what does the future hold for kind of like e-commerce? What can we expect? What changes can we expect? Where do you think the e-commerce market is going? And how where do you think the opportunities are within e-commerce?
E-commerce market is definitely growing for sure. Even though in like times like this, what I expect to see is that in the immediate period where everyone is still kind of nervous and panicking about what the pandemic is all about, I would say that the sales of non-essentials like fashion, clothes might drop. But maybe 2 or 3 months from now, when the dust has settled and then everyone realizes that we would be in this for a long haul, I think they will go back to buying non-essentials again. And when that comes, I'm sure that e-commerce will keep growing, because what is happening now is that brick and mortar stores, physical stores that don't have online presence, now they have had to shut down their stores, right? So now they have to transition themselves to digital or online channels. So it will just keep growing. And I think as e-commerce is growing, then consumers or the end users will expect a better or more native experience from buying something online. And I think that's where we come in.
Do you see voice playing a big part in the future of e-commerce and the future of the UX element of e-commerce? And how do you, from a data perspective, how do you then leverage that?
I would say so, because Amazon is already like a market leader when it comes to voice recognition. So I think it would definitely be a big part for sure. But I think what we have to figure out in terms of voice is privacy, because in the US not so much, but in Europe and probably in the UK as well, people are very conscious about what data is collected while this machine is there in your house hearing the conversations all the time. So while that is being resolved, I would say that shopping from your phone or shopping from your desktop is still going to be, it will remain a big part of the e-commerce market.
Yeah, I mean it's interesting because I'm an advisor for a voice technology company based in Silicon Valley, and but targeted at the food and beverage industry, which obviously has been hit really hard by this pandemic. But that was definitely one of the resistances that we had while we were developing it. What happens to the data, and essentially we had to build technology that anonymized the data so as it could then be given to the clients, so as they could use it to improve their marketing, improve their offering, improve the user experience. But it all had to be anonymized and secured and layers and layers and layers of kind of like technology to to ensure that those privacy concerns were met. But yeah, I think it's interesting because we started this kind of like 2 years ago, and the first year we almost fell on deaf ears to everyone, but within a year everyone was talking about it, and it's we've really seen a shift, and I think I do believe that it's going to play a large part in the future of kind of like all kinds of e-commerce in the future.
So too, yeah. If because we also see it with our current product, right? Like when we pitch our solution to a client, then the first thing would be, okay, are you collecting anything personal about my customers?
Yeah.
And then we would say no. So I can imagine that like with voice, that concern is definitely going to be more intensified.
What's the impact that you're hoping to have in the industry?
Definitely what I said, like how do we, if not make it better, how do we merge the online experience so that when you shop online that you would get that level of personal treatment, or that level of feeling like someone understands you as if you were in a physical store. So bridging that online channel with physical retail is what we are hoping to achieve.
Do you see yourselves more as a champion of the retailer or as a champion of the consumer?
Yes, I would say, yeah, because we are here to help retailers get better at selling online, at understanding their customers.
Okay, we've talked a little bit about you had funding from Chile, and you've now got some funding from Luxembourg.
Yep.
So after observing or after seeing or being immersed in both the Asian and the global startup ecosystems, what do you think the things are that your country needs in order for startups to grow even more, and in order to encourage more people to get involved in startups? So if you look at it from the perspective of both Chile, what do they need in order to encourage more of that, and then what's needed in kind of Singapore, Luxembourg, from your perspective, having experienced all of those?
Biggest takeaway from me for like the time that I had in Chile was that this government initiative is like amazing in bringing foreign entrepreneurs who only have an idea to turn that idea into like a business, into reality. And then what that does, that I noticed in Chile, is that they've been very successful at bringing at diversifying their economy, because Chile is primarily a dominant player in copper, in mining, right? So before Startup Chile happened, the economy was like revolving around mining industry. But now you would see startups that are in many different industries.
Sectors,
like you have companies that are like us, that are marketing SaaS for e-commerce. You have companies that are focusing on the financial sector. You have companies that are doing something in healthcare. So I think that's the beauty of this program, right? And for I think what I noticed also, like for example in Singapore, even though there's no program that's similar to what I was doing in Chile, the government is very good and it's very proactive in helping small startups, in early stage startups. So as long as you are trying to solve something in Singapore, then you can apply for maybe a grant or a funding. They can pair you up with like a company that can do a pilot with you. So I think that's where maybe most countries can take a note on, that if they want to, like really bring in innovation, if they want to diversify their economy, like startups are a way to go.
It's really interesting as well that you mentioned that with Startup Chile, what they're actually doing is bringing people from other countries in and supporting them in starting businesses in their country. Whereas here in the UK and perhaps in, like you referred to, in Singapore, actually what they're doing, yes, they're investing in startups, but they're essentially investing in startups that are homegrown. And I think that diversity piece that you talked about only comes by bringing people from different cultures into a different environment, because they see different things, because they've been exposed to things that perhaps aren't so common in the country where they're residing at that point.
Definitely. And if you think about it, right, when we were running a business in Chile, I mean, we've hired a Chilean person. We were renting an apartment in Chile. We were paying for different things. So the money that we actually received from the government
was all going back.
Exactly.
It's quite a clever idea, isn't it?
Yeah.
Since winning the Seedstars country competition, is there anything that you've changed about the way that you operate your business?
So, for me, like after we participated in the Seedstars competition in Thailand, because I went back to Thailand, and then I met a lot of people, and because what the event did was that it brought in very different parts of the ecosystem. So before Seedstars, I didn't know anything about the Thai startup ecosystem because we grew the company in Chile. So when I went back and then I was part of that event, then I met a lot more new people. Some are prospects, some are potential mentors. So I think that was really good at helping me understand what the local startup scene is doing more.
So perhaps again diversified your own network and gave you a much wider perspective on the startup sector and the startup world. Yeah, cool. One last question that I want to ask you, and that is, you're one of the Seedstars heroes, being a country winner. Who are your heroes, both from a business perspective, but also from perhaps a personal perspective?
Like from a personal perspective, I don't know if this is a cliche, but like my mom is my hero, because when she was growing up, like she didn't have much, but when my sister and I were born, then she made sure that every dollar, everything she had, she would give it to us. So I think I took that as a for me as well, because now I'm a mom. Then I realized that what sort of like difficulties that she had to go through. So professionally, I love Elon Musk because of his crazy ideas, and I read his book, and then I saw that like when he was building I think SpaceX, and I think he was running on very limited money. He was putting his own money, and then he was on the verge of going bankrupt, but he still decided to go ahead with the experiment. So I think that was, a lot of people would have given up, but he didn't, and then he's look at where he is today. That's also like a reminder that we shouldn't give up as entrepreneurs if things get hard, which they will many times.
Yeah, absolutely. That couldn't be a truer statement. That's certainly in any business, but I think it's amplified in the startup space. You will experience far more challenges and in a much more condensed time period. So your emotions go up and down, from extreme highs to extreme lows, almost in some cases hourly rather than over the space of a year.
But it's also very rewarding because you learn so much. You get to wear so many different hats, and so the personal learning is like it's one of the biggest things that I would encourage anyone to start something on their own.
Thank you so much for joining us, Anne. There's been some real kind of like insights both into how as a wife and as a mother you manage a startup, but also kind of like how you've managed the startup in several different kind of like continents. So really, thank you so much for being open with us, for sharing with us. For anyone that's listening, if you've enjoyed this, then please check out some of the other podcasts that have been recorded with other startup founders. I'm sure you'll find those just as enlightening and just as interesting. So thank you so much, and it's been an absolute pleasure speaking to you today.
The pleasure is mine. Thank you so much, Pete. And thank you everyone who's listening.
Thank you for listening to our hero's journey, and subscribe now for more stories on Seedstars podcast.